Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Thursday, the first day of May 2025. And the latest headlines with respect to the U.S. and Iran are certainly heading in the right direction. So let's look at them on this 77th anniversary of the founding of the modern state of Israel. U.S.-Iran nuclear talks postponed. Iran says next round depends on U.S. approach. This is a Reuters story. We're very happy to hear this. France says no Europe. Iran meeting on Friday after U.S. nuclear talks postpones. They were supposed to talk to Iran. They're not talking to him either. Trump then threatens countries purchasing Iranian oil, petrochemicals with sanctions. And finally, from the Jerusalem Post, Saudi normalization is harmed but interestingly, still possible with win over Iran or Hamas. So this is all moving in the direction we would expect these things to see, given what Scripture says about last days Bible prophecy and the place that Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the U.S., and others will play. All right, let's get to the headlines. Headline number one. U.S.-Iran nuclear talks postponed. Iran says next round depends on U.S. approach. This is from Reuters and the Times of Israel. Iranian officials said new oil sanctions are not helping nuclear talks. Washington says it never confirmed participation in fourth round of talks in Rome, but expects them to happen soon. Okay, this comes from Dubai and United Arab Emirates. A fourth round of talks between the U.S. and Iran, which has been due to take place in Rome on Saturday, has been postponed, and a new date will be set depending on the U.S. approach, a senior Iranian official told Reuters on Thursday. Earlier on Thursday, Iran accused the U.S. of contradictory behavior and provocative statements after Washington warned Tehran of consequences for backing Yemen's Houthis and imposed new oil-related sanctions on it amid nuclear talks. U.S. sanctions on Iran during the nuclear talks are not helping the sides to resolve the nuclear dispute through diplomacy, the Iranian official told Reuters. Depending on the U.S. approach, the date of the next round of talks will be announced. Now, Oman, which mediated earlier sessions of the U.S.-Iran talks, said the next round of nuclear discussions provisionally planned for May 3rd would be rescheduled for logistical reasons. The U.S. said that the weekend meeting had never been confirmed, but it expected talks to take place soon. A State Department spokeswoman, Tammy Bruce, told reporters, "We expect another round of talks will take place in the near future." Now, at the same time, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi wrote on X, "Together with Omani and U.S. interlocutors, we have decided to postpone the fourth round of talks for logistical and technical reasons. On Iran's part, there is no change in our determination to secure a negotiated solution," he continued. "In fact, we are more determined than ever to achieve a just and balanced deal." Now, notice the first thing he says, guaranteeing an end of sanctions. Guaranteeing an end of sanction. That's, their look at what this agreement's going to do. Nothing about them stopping their nuclear program, nothing about stopping, exporting terrorism around the world, nothing about stopping their missile program, guaranteeing an end of sanctions and creating confidence that Iran's nuclear program will forever remain peaceful while ensuring Iranian rights are fully respected. So much nonsense. Separately, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Esmail Baghai said Tehran would continue to engage seriously and resolutely in result-oriented negotiations with the U.S., state media reported. U.S. President Donald Trump, who has threatened to attack Iran if diplomacy fails, has signaled confidence in clinching a new pact with the Islamic Republic that would block Tehran's path to a nuclear bomb. Trump, who restored a maximum pressure campaign on Tehran since February, ditched a 2015 nuclear pact between Iran and six world powers in 2018 during his first term and reimposed crippling sanctions on Iran. Now, here's the key. Iran, which is sworn to Israel's destruction, insists its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, but enriches uranium to levels far beyond any civilian use and obstructs inspectors from checking its nuclear facilities. Need we say any more? On Wednesday, Washington imposed sanctions on entities it accused of involvement in the illicit trade of Iranian oil and petrochemicals. Separately, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned Iran that it would face consequences for supporting the Houthis, who control northern Yemen and have been attacking ships in the Red Sea, in what they say is solidarity with Palestinians amidst Israel's war with Hamas. in Gaza. Washington, who has been bombing the Houthis intensively since mid-March, hitting more than 1,000 targets. Now, get this. Tehran claims the Houthis, whose slogan calls for death to America, death to Israel, and a curse on the Jews, sounds familiar to the Iranians. They just act independently. All right. Again, this is definitely moving in the right direction, and we hope it continues. The sanctions that are there, because Iran is hurting. They are very much panicking because of what's happened. They were panicking before that big explosion there in their container area there in that port. And like we said this morning, it's a lot worse off than anybody ever imagined. And it seems Iran has continued to be put in the back seat with respect to the ability to respond to any type of attack that the Americans and Israel may do. And again, the time is right. We'll just see. Let's just see what happens. But another great headline, France says no Europe-Iran meeting on Friday after U.S. nuclear talks postponed. There is no meeting scheduled between the Europeans and Iranians on Friday, as Tehran has suggested earlier in the week. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot says a technical meeting was planned prior to, I believe, the third high-level meeting between the U.S. and Iran, he told AFP in an interview. Since the meeting is not taking place, the technical meeting is no longer relevant, at least at this time. Again, this is also important. Hopefully, the West will realize that the time for talking is over. And then we have this. Trump threatens countries purchasing Iranian oil, petrochemicals with sanctions. Alert. All purchases of Iranian oil or petrochemical products must stop now. All uppercase letters. U.S. President Donald Trump writes on Truth Social. Any country or person who buys, and here's uppercase, any amount of uppercase oil or uppercase petrochemicals from Iran will be subject to immediately secondary sanctions, he continues. They will not be allowed to do business with the United States of America in any way, shape, or form. More good news, Iran is being further isolated. And finally, our last story also carries very good news, and this is really interesting. Saudi normalization harmed, but still possible with win over Iran or Hamas. This is an exclusive story from the Jerusalem Post. Now, as the Saudis have said for so long, the easiest path to normalization is still a Palestinian Authority in Gaza or some type of Palestinian state, which will never happen. But there are some other surprising options, sources say, which is fascinating. While Benjamin Netanyahu's playing field to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia has been significantly slowed and harmed, there are still at least two surprising pathways to that crown jewel of Israeli-Arab normalization, which the Bible assumes is going to happen, by the way. The Jerusalem Post has learned. Top Israeli sources acknowledge that the classic and easiest pathway to normalization has been and remains an end to the Israel-Hamas war, placing a reformed Palestinian Authority in charge of Gaza, along with modern Arab allies, and progress towards a two-state vision, if falling short of an actual two-state new reality. But they argue there are two other potential paths that are more in line with Netanyahu's current regional vision that could also lead to normalization with Riyadh. Surprisingly, one of the pathways is a complete defeat of Hamas in Gaza. Although this would require continuing the war for some substantial additional time, and many defense officials believe such a goal is unobtainable given the various constraints, others argue that both the Saudis and Egypt, unlike Qatar and Turkey, want Hamas removed from Gaza, given that they view the terror group as an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood, which has threatened their countries as well. Really, the objection of many modern Arab regimes who loathe Hamas is that Israel has been unsuccessful in removing Hamas for over 18 months, and if it continues to fail, and continuing the war is pointless, it only undermines their stability and the stability of the region. Here comes the but. But in a theoretical scenario in which Israel could remove Hamas in a reasonable amount of time, they might view it as such a positive game changer towards greater future stability against the Muslim Brotherhood in that region that they might move towards normalization. So this is quite interesting. And again, here's the reason we say this. Saudi Arabia is mentioned in Scripture in Ezekiel 38:39 with the sanctioned names Sheba and Dedan. And along with the other Gulf states there, when this invasion takes place, led by Russia, joined by Iran, Turkey, Sudan, Libya, also possibly Morocco and Algeria. When this happens, the Gulf states do not become involved in the invasion against Israel. In fact, they protest it. And when we read that, we get the idea that The reason they're protesting is not so much because they weren't invited to participate, which is theoretically possible, but because they have some type of normalization with Israel. And the reason they do is not because they love Israel. They're just afraid of Iran and what Iran might do with the other Shia Muslims in the area and the other countries in the area. And so, particularly now, if Russia leads the charge, this would be even more problematic for the Saudis. And so, basically, what we see happening here, if Saudis do, sidle up to Israel and put together some type of agreement, which like the Abraham Accords, Trump said there's about 10 other nations that want to join in. If that does happen, then that would make sense with respect to what Scripture is saying, because what you would have here on the one hand, Turkey, Iran, and Russia, which are the attacking nations right now anyway, along with Sudan and Libya. Although Libya is kind of, in the midst of the civil war still. But the point is, these are nations that are known to be adventuresome. They do terrorist activities, et cetera, et cetera. So they would join together. Makes total sense with the scenario we see. And it also makes total sense that the Saudis would come to some type of agreement with Israel. Again, not because they love Israel, but to protect themselves from, first and foremost, Iran. So this is a fascinating article here. And so the Saudis' primary concern, as it says, is stability. And if Israel actually does succeed in destroying Iran's nuclear program, as the story keeps on, some top Israeli officials believe the Saudis would be so enthusiastic about the removal of the Iranian threat that they would move to normalize relations with Jerusalem, simply based on that radical outcome and a new cornerstone of regional stability. Now, as such, the Saudis are not actually against an Israeli airstrike on Tehran's nuclear program that completely succeeds and leaves them untouched. In other words, Saudis will not be touched by any of this. It succeeds in neutralizing the program, shoves it way back, or at least puts it in mothballs. And we're assuming something like that would happen. But again, at the same time, according to Scripture, Iran will invade with Russia and Turkey, so they will still have some military power there, some aspect there will be, but it'll be of secondary nature. So basically, what this article is saying, before all it said was, well, Palestinian state, Palestinian diplomacy, this and that. But now the Saudis seem to be saying, no, if they get rid of Hamas, which will get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a problem for Egypt, or more importantly, if they cut off the head of the stake with Iran and take care of their nuclear program, then possibly we'll have normal relations. Now, if that happens, and we assume something like that will happen, it's exactly precisely what we see Scripture saying, because we see how the players are lined up. On the one hand, Russia, Turkey, and Iran. On the other hand, the United States not being in this, neither is Egypt in it. Israel is left on its own. But the Saudis and the Gulf states, when an invasion does take place, will be protesting it. They'll be protesting this happening, but they won't get involved militarily to help Israel. But they will not like what's going on. And so that seems to, basically portend of what possibly we talked about right now. Bottom line is, sooner or later, we're going to see all this be finally set up, and it's in the process of being set up right now. Again, if you're interested in finding out what the Scripture says about it, check out our website, Educating Our World. The book 25 Signs, we're near the end, signs 9 through 11, where we talk about in detail the final invasion, or not the final invasion, but the last days invasion of Israel, Ezekiel 38, 39, who the players are and who's on whose side. Because there are four groups, as we see: the ones that attack, the one who is attacked, Israel, the ones who sit on the sidelines, the Saudis, and then the ones that aren't even mentioned, including the United States of America. So we are not a player in the last days. So fascinating possibility that this could happen. The Saudis get to some type of normalization. If Iran is neutralized, it would fit perfectly with what we expect to see according to Scripture. As always, we are amazed but never surprised at how God's working. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.